Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, while Israel slept, CBN President Gordon Robertson interviews former Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yakov Katz about his new book, looking at the events of October 7th. Could anything have been done to prevent it? Plus, a story of heroism in the midst of carnage. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Today we're bringing you an examination of Israel's worst day in modern history, October 7th. What led up to it and whether crucial intelligence was overlooked. It's all in the book, While Israel Slept, by former Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yakov Katz and journalist Amir Bobot. Katz breaks it down in an in-depth interview with CBN President Gordon Robertson. And they tackle the question we're all asking, what's next? Take a look. With more than 1,200 murdered and over 250 kidnapped, October 7th marked the worst day in Israel's history since the Holocaust. In the book, While Israel Slept, former Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yakov Katz reconstructs the warning signs Israel missed prior to the attack and assumptions that would prove fatal. A military intelligence system that failed to read the enemy's intent while overestimating its own deterrence. Katz details the complacency, mistaken analysis, and containment policy that allowed Hamas to prepare an assault Israel assumed would never happen. He reveals the inside story of drama happening the night before in the front lines, as well as failure that paved the way to disaster. Katz also looks forward with recommendations on what must change, from southern border defense to civil readiness, so Israel is never surprised again. He adds accountability matters, but so does fixing the system now. Deterrence isn't a plan, preparedness is.
Yakov Katz is with us now. Thanks so much for joining with us. Where were you on October 7th? You know, whenever I talk with Israelis, it's always a very personal story.
It's a personal story for a country that each and every person still has some trauma that they carry with them. My family and I, we were home on October 7th. It was Jerusalem. It was a holiday. It was a Saturday. It was a Shabbat. We were sleeping in a little late, 8:30 in the morning, sirens go off in Jerusalem, we go down to the bomb shelter, and obviously this was not something that was supposed to happen. Later that day, our oldest daughter, who's now 22, just finished her military service. She was training to become an IDF officer, and as her father, I drove her back to the bus that was taking her back to base, to war. And I remember my wife turns to me and says, Yakov, does she have to go? And I, you know, like any mother, like any father, any parent, and the answer was yes. This is a war that our country is in, and she is a soldier, and this is what her job is to do right now.
Wow, that must have been just heart-rending, because you don't know if you're going to see her again.
Well, you don't know where she's going to go, and I mean, look, every Israeli in our country, I think, knew someone who was either abducted or killed on October 7th. We're a small country with 0 degrees of separation. My own family, we knew 2 hostages from day one. We knew people who were killed on October 7th. In the 2 years since, my kids have known teachers whose husbands have been killed, rabbis in their schools who have been killed, kids who were in their youth groups who have been killed, soldiers who have stood up to sacrifice themselves on behalf of the security and safety of the state of Israel. It's a remarkable nation. Literally, I think it was the current prime minister who said, a nation of lions who have really stood up in a way to stand and to defend and to fight for their country.
Yeah, lions that are rising up.
Yeah.
But your book details that there were some pretty serious mistakes in not just the day of or the week of, but going back for a couple of years. And one of them was the intelligence services actually had the plans.
This was the worst circumstances of every possible mistake, unfortunately, that could be made. Because you can't say, Gordon, that Israel did not know that there was Hamas. Right? We had been fighting a war with them on average every 2 years ever since we pulled out of Gaza back in the summer of 2005. So we knew there was Hamas. We knew they were an enemy. We knew they had bad intentions towards us. We knew that they were declaring genocidal intentions. So how is it that we didn't think that we needed to go and get the job done and take care of them while they were still weaker before they grew into this monster that exploded into our country back on October 7th? And I think that's the real question, because when we look to the future, we have to ask ourselves, can this happen again? So maybe it won't happen with Gaza in the near future, but it could happen again because Israelis want quiet. They want to live. They want to have a good life. And containment, if that's an option, might come back on the table. So when we looked at what happened, not only was there a flurry of activity in the 24 hours preceding, intelligence alarm bells going off in the offices of the intelligence agencies indicating that something was happening. So there was information. They just didn't have the imagination to understand what it was and to put the pieces together. But even the plans of Hamas, 2 years earlier, intelligence analysts had drafted a plan that described almost one-to-one what was going to happen. The plan's name was Jericho Walls, named for the biblical city of Jericho, whose walls came tumbling down, similar to what eventually happened to the barrier that Israel had built along the border with Gaza. And you know what was crazy? Was that Israel's defense minister on October 7th, Yoav Gallant, former IDF general, never saw the plan until 5 weeks into the war. How did it not make its way to his desk? And I think for all those reasons and much more, we have to study, we have to learn, we have to better prepare, because there will be more strategic surprises in the future.
Well, Hamas seemed to know exactly what the defenses were, exactly how to cut through, and within moments of the attack had literally blinded the IDF. And was there an over-reliance on the tech?
There was 100% coordinated over-reliance on technology. We're all familiar with Iron Dome, right? It can swat missiles out of the sky like a mosquito. In 2014, when Hamas started entering Israel with tunnels and killed Israeli soldiers during an operation back then, so what did Israel do? No problem, we'll build a wall. We built an underground wall. We created a system to detect when they were digging tunnels across the border. How many people crossed into Israel on October 7th in a tunnel? 0. They came across the barrier. They came across the ground. And the way they did this, it was a very low-tech operation, but highly sophisticated. They studied the IDF. They understood how the military deploys. They understood what happens when they fire barrages of hundreds and thousands of rockets, as they did in the morning at 6:29 a.m. when they started that barrage. The Israeli soldiers, even in the frontline positions, go into the safe areas, and then they made a mad dash for the border, blew holes. Drones dropped explosive devices on cameras. And the first place they went was to those frontline positions to blow up the communications. So what did you have? You had an IDF force along the border, not small, but they could not see, they could not hear, they couldn't talk to Tel Aviv to call up reinforcements, and they're now fighting for survival in their own bases because they're bogged down because Hamas is in there massacring, killing, and eventually taking hostage as well.
Let's talk about the female observer unit. Here they're watching highly unusual activity. They're trained to identify it. They're reporting it up their chain of command. Yeah, I think I had this illusion that somehow Israel was this egalitarian society, the nation that had produced Golda Meir, and women were part of the military and military structure and were honored and respected. But their commanders actually threatened them with court-martial if they continued to report.
Yeah. So these soldiers, these female soldiers, in Hebrew we call them tatzpitaniot, like you said. They're the observers.
I can't pronounce that.
They sit in front of these screens, and they literally watch. Everyone has an area of operations along the border. The joke was, and I've been to these bases a number of times, the joke was if a bee flies by, they'll pick up on it. And their job is to see if you have a brush here and the next day it's there, why'd it move? What happened? Maybe there's a tunnel now, a rocket launcher. And in the months preceding October 7th, they're noticing a lot of changes. They're noticing extra training on the border. They're noticing more senior Hamas commanders coming and looking into Israel. They're seeing things, and they're reporting this back to their commanders. And their commanders are saying to them, you don't understand. You're a low-level soldier. Keep doing your job. If we need something, we'll let you know. And the reason was, I think, people have claimed sexism, and that could be part of it. But I think it was much more than that. What was at play here was that what they were saying didn't fit the narrative. Because the narrative in Israel was that Hamas did not want war. Hamas was deterred. Hamas wanted to keep getting the Qatari cash. Remember, Qatar was sending $30 million every month to Hamas. Hamas was being allowed, Gaza was being allowed to bring 20,000 workers into Israel every day to work. So what do you mean? Yeah, we see what you're saying, But that's not what's happening. The policy of containment, what we call in Hebrew the conceptia, the concept or the paradigm through which we looked at everything, that lens, it just didn't fit. So it was dismissed and pushed aside.
You mentioned it earlier that Israelis want peace. They want to live. They want to have a hope. They want to have children, grandchildren. They want prosperity. They want a better life. Hamas is actually on record, Hezbollah is on record, that is an inherent weakness, that because they're willing to die and they want to die in jihad, that they have a strategic advantage.
100%. I mean, our strength is our weakness, and our weakness is our strength. Because we want a good life, we're willing to turn a blind eye, kick the can down the road, contain the threat, not to deal with it. I mean, Gordon, look at what's happened to the world. Imagine, this is after Israel went to war, after we faced the most brutal massacre, the most Jews murdered on a single day since the Holocaust. There's no war more justified. Look how quickly the world turned on us. Now imagine, do we really think that had Israel... And they're still turning. Do we imagine that had Israel gone to war without being attacked, to preempt, to prevent an October 7th, because they had intelligence, the world would stand by and applaud? Of course not. We know that. So there's something broken here. But with that said, and you hit the nail on the head, we have to understand here in the West that the values of these groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, are completely different than our values. The people of Gaza, for Hamas, their job is to be killed. Because you got to ask yourself a very simple question. And all these fake genocide accusations that are being thrown around here in the United States and Europe. Hamas had built under Gaza 300, 400 miles of tunnels, bunkers. Those are bomb shelters. How come they don't let the people of Gaza into them? And you know, they let the cat out of the bag because the senior Hamas commander was asked this. You know what he said? It's not for them. It's for us. So what does that mean? The people of Gaza are meant to stay on top. The Hamas terrorists and commanders go underground from where they operate and plan and orchestrate their attacks and launch their rockets. But when a country like Israel wants to defend itself, to attack, as any country in the world would do, the Palestinians above ground, they're meant to be killed. That serves the Hamas ambition.
Well, what's the way forward? You know, in the aftermath of October 7th, the quote that came to me was a quote from World War II, General Eisenhower. The world has yet to see the awakened fury of a democracy. And, you know, it was our Pearl Harbor that awakened us and the fury that got unleashed to not just Japan, but to Germany. And I had this sense that the governments, the terror groups in the Middle East had no idea what they had done. The awakened fury of Israel was going to come. And now here we are 2 years later, and the victories are just again and again and again.
Right.
And now clearly the dominant power in the Middle East. What happens now? Are we into a situation where Israel can win every single battle, but still not win the peace?
Well, this book is one side of the October 7th coin. It's the failures, it's the mistakes, it's the lessons we need to learn to prevent it from happening again. But the other side of this coin is the re-engineering of the Middle East that has taken place in the 2 years since. Iran is on the defensive, its nuclear installations destroyed and heavily damaged. Hezbollah beaten back, a shadow of what it once was. The pager attack, Nasrallah killed, his successor's successor, Assad regime gone. And Hamas, still there, not completely gone, but you've had for the first time the Arab countries, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, has brought the Arab countries together to take responsibility and ownership of what's going to happen in Gaza. And the 20-point plan, we got back the living hostages. Let's hope this moves forward to a point that we're able to get the stabilization force in Gaza, get a new governing entity in Gaza. That is not Hamas. That's what's supposed to happen. And the disarmament and de-radicalization. Lots of complicated steps. But if it goes forward, we have a new reality in the Middle East with huge opportunity. Normalization with Saudi Arabia. Maybe with Lebanon and Syria. I mean, so where we go from here, and of course with Iran, we got to keep the pressure on top of them to prevent them from rebuilding their nuclear program. America's involvement in that operation, the 12-day war in June, of biblical proportion. So I'm actually optimistic when I look to the future. I say if we can learn the lessons, we can implement them, and we can take advantage of these opportunities we have, we are in a whole new reality when it comes to the Middle East. I mean, as we say in Hebrew, Baruch Hashem, thank God that we now have these opportunities.
But there's also dangers. I mean, you've got Saudi Arabia, UAE already saying if Hamas keeps their weapons and stays in power, we're out of here. This isn't, there's no way there's going to lead to peace. And they're warning pretty dramatically, Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood, and Erdogan is certainly sympathetic, if not full-fledged Muslim Brotherhood. So if those two countries are in charge of some kind of peace force in Gaza, there's no peace there. No. It's just a pause and reload, and we're going to re-attack.
100%. I think what people also need to understand is that decisive victory is the most basic ingredient for success. Because let's look back to World War II. Why did Japan and Germany embark on a new journey that embraced the West and Western values? It was because suddenly they changed. They lost the war. And when you lose the war, that triggers introspection and thinking, where did we go wrong? We need Hamas to understand that. Now, militarily, they've lost. Politically, they have yet to lose. And we need that new governing entity. We need a force that can prevent Hamas from reconstituting itself. I totally agree with you, Gordon. No one's going to deploy soldiers on the ground if you have Hamas fighters who are out there. They're executing people in broad daylight. And at the same time, when we look at the region, I mentioned the upside, right? The decline of the Iranian axis. But you're also right that at the same time as Iran drops, who's going up? The Muslim Brotherhood, the Qataris, and the Turks. And this has to have us concerned. Israel has said very clearly, and I commend the Prime Minister on this, we're not going to let the Qataris or the Turks deploy troops inside the Gaza Strip. We're not going to let people who are already biased and against us. Qatar was the place where the Hamas leaders had sanctuary. It was the funder of Hamas. Turks, just listen to any time Erdogan speaks, the vile anti-Semitism that comes out of his mouth towards the Jewish people and the state of Israel. They're not the ones who are going to keep our security and our safety in the Gaza Strip. And I think we have learned in this war that while we need this country, America, as our existential ally, we can't rely on Europe. We can't rely on anyone else. We can rely on ourselves and our relationship with the United States.
All right. Thanks for the insight. The book is called While Israel Slept. It's available wherever books are sold. It's definitely informative. And you'll get a wonderful review of what were the mistakes leading to it, but also what's the path forward. Yakov, thanks so much for being with us.
The October 7th Hamas attacks devastated many Israeli communities on the Gaza border, but one community has a different story, a story of heroic resistance and survival. Our correspondent Chuck Holton brings us that inspiring account.
Ein Habazor is a small farming community just 4 miles from Gaza. As Hamas terrorists invaded on October 7th, this village became an unlikely stronghold of resistance.
We realized for the first second that this is something different. We took the kids to the shelter, and then the chief of security sent us a text message, go to the fence, to the gate, to defend our people. They're invading to Israel.
Pretty much every single kibbutz and small village around Israel has one of these big yellow security gates at the entrance. And most of the time they stay open, but the Hamas terrorists took advantage of that fact on October 7th by bringing jamming devices that wouldn't let people close those gates. And a split-second decision on the part of the guard at Ein Habazor probably saved hundreds of lives. As the attack unfolded, villagers found themselves drastically outgunned.
My brother was the only one with the rifle. That time in the front gate, when they came with a pickup full of terrorists and motorcycles. And they came fully armed. It wasn't just a terror attack, that was a military operation.
When Gepner's brother was shot in the shoulder, Yiftach knew he had to get him to a hospital. So he loaded him in his car and sped out the back gate, right into a waiting squad of terrorists.
We saw the ambush of 2 pickups and several motorcycles with a bunch, about 30 terrorists, that started massive shooting on the car. My brother was hit for the second time in his hip and in his belly, several bullets. All the windows was exploding. I was managed to drive in reverse. We managed to escape.
Remarkably, no one from Ein Habazor was killed or kidnapped that day. The village's preparedness played a crucial role in their defense.
When the chief of security sent us a text message, they're invading, go out, we already had a group of 70 people that went out without even asking any question. Now it's a different story. Now we have enough rifle, enough handguns, anything we need to independently defend ourselves if there will be a situation like that.
Now, months later, the village is rebuilding and growing stronger.
Now, we are September 1st, this is the beginning of the school year, there are about 85% of the people that came back.
This resilience isn't just about security. It's about building a thriving community in the face of adversity.
We are opening a new sports center here in the Moshav. We're just going to be stronger because there is no other option that we're going to leave this piece of land, this beautiful piece of land, without having our people here.
For Dr. Gepner and his neighbors, the events of October 7th have only strengthened their resolve.
Israel was established after the Holocaust, with zero chance to establish the country. We survived the 67 war, the 73 war. Look at where we are now, when we have a strong, maybe the strongest army relative to the size of the population. We're going to win this war. This is not even a question. Keep that in mind. Israel will just be stronger following October 7th.
From Israel, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Bravery shows up in all kinds of places. The family in our next story faced tough medical news about their daughter and took action in the best way they knew how. But thanks to CBN partners, CBN Israel was able to stand in the gap with them. Here's their story.
Solomaya is from a family of Jewish Ukrainian refugees in Israel. While she was very young, her parents noticed issues with her mobility. She was diagnosed with a severe form of cerebral palsy that has since required intensive ongoing care.
When she got diagnosed, we were left hopeless. It was very discouraging. I questioned God. Why did we receive such a terrible diagnosis?
Solomaya's family pitched in to support her therapies, but the funds they'd scraped together vanished almost overnight. Keeping up the critical treatments felt impossible.
Our finances are limited, but even when money is tight, it's never really a dead end. I wonder what people who don't know God do in such moments.
Through a local Christian fellowship, Katya heard about CBN Israel. We quickly connected the family to a leading therapy center and covered all costs, ensuring Solomaya received the steady, vital care she needed.
Every day we focus on improving. We see a big difference with the help of the therapies, mainly in her emotional development, learning, talking. The fact that she can now play with the boys, and it even brings the family together. Thank God for the patience and strength through all of this.
Thanks to you, we stepped in to fuel this family's fight for Solomaya. Your care made the difference. Now, with steady medical attention, hope has returned to their home.
Well, that's all for this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.